Hi everyone, I'm Emma.
And I'm Dominique. We run Yellow Door Collective, a full-service marketing agency based in Cape Town, South Africa. Welcome to our podcast, Life Behind the Yellow Door.
When we met almost a decade ago, we had no idea what was in store for us. But we soon realized that common values and aspirations are a solid basis for a partnership.
In this podcast, we'll share some of our journey as entrepreneurs and new generation agency owners in South Africa. What really happens behind the yellow door. We hope to inspire you with honest and authentic conversations about running an agency, the life of being an entrepreneur, and featuring chats with the people who have shaped our world. Welcome to episode 6. Thanks for joining us. In our last episode, we chatted to Vanessa Clark about the ever-changing nature of our industry. Vanessa shared some real pearls on how to stay sane in the change and how the fundamentals really are the same. So do take a listen if you missed it.
And today we're excited to welcome another guest. Carol normally sits on the other side of our table and produces the podcast with Jason, but today we've got her in front of the mic. And we'll be chatting about the nature of collaboration and how it's formed quite a big part of both Yellow Door and the Stellar Effect and their journeys so far.
Awesome, yes. It's exciting to be on this side of the table today.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So, Carol, you started the Stellar Effect with Jason Skippers nearly 2 years ago. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and this journey that you've been on?
Yes, so I have a background in quite a few different things, and the Stellar Effect feels like a bit of a convergence of quite a few of those skills, I guess. So I am a musician and I studied music, and then I actually am a qualified music therapist by trade or profession, and worked as a music therapist for about 7 or 8 years. I worked a lot with different people and worked in Pollsmoor Prison, worked all over the place. And I think what fascinated me about all of that work and all of my different experiences of performance and different spaces was people's stories. And the fact that we all have a story and stories are really powerful. In a lot of my music therapy work, I heard a lot of sad stories or, of difficult stories, and just recognizing that we have a lot to share with each other and really interested in that kind of connection. And then Jason and I worked on a film project together where we wrote the score for the film.
Wow,
it was
cool.
very short little, about 7-minute piece. And that was the first time, actually I'm lying, that was the second time we'd collaborated. The first time he produced my first album, or he mixed and recorded my first album. So we kind of got to know each other then worked on the second project, and that's where the Stellar Effect was born. So we started out as a music production house, and started doing a little bit of business development. I also have worked in entrepreneurial development, so had a little bit of a background in that, and was applying those principles to develop the Stellar Effect. And in doing so, started working with a business coach who has really shaped, I think, a lot of our thinking around our business. She's an expert in product development, which we didn't know at the time, but now we know what that is. And
the journey.
The journey of it all. Anyway, and basically we'd been exploring podcasting a little bit. We'd had the idea at the end of 2017 to explore it, and we kind of, in doing that, we did our own podcast where we interviewed some of our friends who were working in the creative industry, really wanting to hear their stories and their journey, because we realized we couldn't be the only ones who were on this adventure. And we learned a lot through the production of our first podcast, and then started researching podcasting as a media form and as an industry, and discovered that there wasn't much going on in South Africa at that stage, especially sort of end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And that's where our business development coach came in, and we started really working, and I guess discovered the niche that is podcasting and a few other forms of storytelling. I guess that's why I mentioned that storytelling thing. That had been quite a big thing, quite a big part of my professional journey, was the elements of stories. And yeah, we spent most of last year developing that and coming up with our product offering with short film and podcasting and storytelling workshops. And I guess now we find ourselves here, at this table, and a lot of little twists and turns along the way, and those obviously continue. But I think that's probably our story in a very small nutshell.
And I think it dovetails really well with our story, because digital storytelling is such a big part of what we do. And I think it's a nice way to introduce the collaboration aspect of, I can't remember whether we got in touch with you or you got in touch with us, but
I think you got in touch. Can I just tell you why I'm saying that? Because you work on this thing for like ever, it feels like forever. You're working on your branding, you work on all of these things, and you were the very first people who reached out to us on social media. That's how I know.
I'm glad we've got that claim to fame. But I think we wanted to do a podcast, and maybe in a similar way to why you did, is that we wanted to test it out because it's something we thought would work for a lot of our clients, and now that we've trialed it, we'll definitely be collaborating more on that. But I think there was just such a nice synergy between the brands, and that's such a good starting point for any collaboration, to have similar values, to see the benefit for both parties. I think if it's a one-way thing, then it's
not
an exchange or a collaboration. And I think that's sort of a starting point to, if you're listening and are wondering whether to collaborate with another agency or a complementary brand.
Definitely.
I think it's a good.
And we also love yellow.
We also both love yellow. Yeah. Essential. Yeah. You must love the same colors.
Yeah.
Yes, the rules. No, definitely. I think for us, we've used. I want to make it sound like, we did this on purpose, being all collaborative and cool. I think for us, it really came out of a necessity, initially anyway, then recognizing after one or two collaborations how incredibly beneficial they can be for both parties. And then starting to look at it, I guess, as more of a strategy or a strategic thing. In terms of how, especially when you're in startup phase, and I know Yellow Door's a little bit further along the path than we are, but when you're starting up, you have time and you have skills. You don't always have a lot of capital though. For us, we didn't want to get into a lot of debt, and we didn't want to sell off parts of our, or give equity away of our business. So for us, we've realized that is a great way to get some of the services and the skills that you need in terms of the type of collaboration we've done, as an example.
Which we maybe need to unpack a bit.
Yes, definitely.
So just to unpack what the collaboration between our two brands sort of entails, the Stellar Effect have obviously produced this amazing podcast for us. And from our side, we've loved the opportunity to do a holistic strategy. So really looking at your branding and your marketing and what that means, how it's put out there, which sort of, when that's implemented, is social media, PR. What else have we done for you?
You put our strategy document together in terms of our marketing as well. You set up all our platforms, the copy for all of those things, kind of really getting our tone. I know you guys spent time looking at our website, thinking of the tone there, and then making sure that the tone that we were was filtering across all the platforms. Yeah. And for us, obviously that was massively beneficial to get a document like that and to kind of really understand branding from that point of view, and also to have the regular posting on our social media platforms. To have people, it's like your job to look at our numbers and to be putting content plans together and that kind of thing. And I guess that also leads to something around collaboration, which is if, do the things that you're good at and finding other people who are good at the things that you're not good at, or maybe you could be good at, but you just don't have time to do.
Yeah, so that kind of was what I was going to say about the different kinds of collaboration. So, for example, ours was more of an exchange where we each brought our skills to the table, whereas I know we're hoping to and have asked you to collaborate on already videos or podcasts with our clients. So in other words, we project manage it and we bring you in to do the actual services.
Yes.
So that's a different kind of collaboration.
Definitely.
And that would be paid, rather than in exchange.
Absolutely. And vice versa, us being able to refer social media clients or, people who need your skills. Again, I think what excites me about this is around creating what we, in the early days of Stella, and now it's sort of starting to come back, what we would call economies of collaboration. And how if we can create an environment where brands are collaborating like this. And I think the biggest reason why it works is because we do have shared values. And because we have a value for collaboration, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
But so around shared values and then being able to create environments where we can tackle projects that we wouldn't necessarily be able to on our own.
Yeah. And when we started Yellow Door, we had a similar journey in that we started it as what we called a collective, which is why it's in our name. But we had a group of like-minded people where we would be able to call on them at any time to be able to expand our services and to offer more than just what we had the skills to do. And since then, we've grown and we've been able to bring in some of those skills in-house. But actually, the way that the world is going, we've actually sort of circled back to, we've always had collaborators and freelancers and consultants on our books, but we've kind of circled back now to being quite lean and mean and having those group of freelancers around us so that we can, again, offer more services at better skill sets.
Yeah, I think it's a way to keep the quality really high. And it's something Vanessa touched on in our last episode, talking about when you bring great minds together, that collective energy and creativity is really strong. And it's something I love as well about my role in terms of strategy and new business is we're always meeting people that we can collaborate with maybe in a year's time. It's not always right now. Plus just having that bank of people that can add value to your clients or your own business, which is exciting. And I think Cape Town's one of the best places to be for that.
Definitely. And I know for us, something that we've also been trialing out is having people that serve as in-house, and I think this is also what you've done in some ways, but serve as in-house like our graphic designer, but she actually has her own business as well. And then we've done also trade exchange on our space with her. So she gives us a certain number of hours a month and she sits in our office, which is hugely beneficial for her because she's not sitting alone at home. She gets that team dynamic, but still manages her own time and all of that, which obviously from an HR perspective is great. And we only have to pay her when you've actually got work for her to do.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing about this whole collaboration idea is that whatever works for each party, as long as both parties feel that they have met in the middle and that they have gained enough from the partnership, then it works.
And that it's transparent. So for us, we have consultants that are on different rates because they have different levels of experience, but we put the same markup onto that, same percentage markup. So we've got a system that we feel is fair and, rewarding them based on their experience and the amount of work.
Yeah.
And something I think we also sort of really value is agreeing on what the scope of work is for a collaboration and being upfront about that, because if it's open-ended, it's very tricky to manage. Whereas if you say, this is what we're doing, that's what you're doing, these are the delivery dates, this is the client's expectations, it's a lot easier to maintain that healthy relationship and boundaries.
Absolutely. And I guess that's how you would approach any kind of business agreement. And that's maybe something, sometimes collaborations aren't very well stipulated. And I mean, even with with the graphic design one I was talking about now, we've got a signed contract which again, there's no money changing hands necessarily, so you wouldn't think that a signed contract's important, but actually it is, because it keeps both of you safe. And I think often, especially in the sort of more creative industry, well, what I've seen is people shy away from anything that makes anything too official and that kind of thing. But
Legal
actually,
documents.
we've really seen the benefit of using things like that, even though we fairly early on in our business journey. But because then, as you say, it's fair. And I think generally, if things feel fair and transparent and there's a level of authenticity and honesty, people are generally pretty happy. And if you've collaborated based on your shared values, then you're mostly going to be on the same page anyway. And
yeah, I think that's a huge part of, and you touched on it already earlier, but just making sure that the people you collaborate with actually share the same vision as you, which helps then to not have to worry too much about the paperwork, but it's still important to have that in place.
Have those things, yeah. Have you guys ever had a collaboration that went bad?
We have. Yeah, I mean, it's
the video one.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that speaks to what you're talking about just having a contract in place, and if there is a fee involved, the same as you would with a client, like being upfront about, when things are paid.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, we were a little bit too lax about letting invoices go unpaid for too long. And I think we learned our lesson very early on about not following up straight away if invoices aren't paid. So I think that wasn't necessarily a collaboration lesson, but rather just a business lesson. But yeah, unfortunately, I think in that case, it was people just not being who they said they were. So I think it is tricky.
Yeah,
you
learn, yeah.
You learn to do your homework. So
Trust your gut.
trust your gut, ask for references, understand who you're working with if there's not a close connection. I think that was a tough lesson, but a good one to learn, as Dom said early on, and hopefully not make the same mistakes twice. But we've been really lucky. We collaborate with people across, I think video is a big one for us, but also we sometimes bring in a PR specialist, designers who have specific strengths or things that they bring to the party, strategists. So we really have been lucky, and I think in every case, photographers, in every case it's added value, which is great that it kind of works. And from a profitability point of view, it has also worked. Like I said, we're very sort of upfront about whether there's a markup, what that's going to be, what the scope of work is. So I think it's a way we can scale our business as well as add value, which is exciting.
And I think, what I'm seeing in our limited experience, but is that generally people then manage themselves. So there's an element, of course, you have to keep communication open and that kind of thing, but generally people are taking responsibility for themselves because it's in their best interest to do so. And so you're not necessarily having to deal with those difficult things of like people not coming on time or, and if it does happen, then it's almost like a business to business conversation, not a employer to employee conversation. So the power dynamic feels a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think with us, if that is the case, if someone misses a deadline, unfortunately they do get less work from us, or we have to manage which projects they work on. So it works, like you say, in their best interest to bring their best self to the party. So
we've covered quite a bit on sort of one or two types of collaborations, but I think there's a few more we can unpack, and one is sort of agency to agency. We love being the lead agency on a project and bringing in more specialized agencies, but we have also worked the other way around where we're sort of a supporting agency, and that can work really well, and I think it's something we'd like to do more of. So for example, a specialized design agency, we could be their content partner. And a sort of less formal one we've done recently, which works well, is just getting someone in a specific industry to give input. And it's often a friend of a friend or a consultant that's work with us on a bigger project, and just getting them to literally spend an hour or two giving a very sort of high level
strategic input on their industry.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we don't profess to know everything. So we know that if there's a client who comes from a very niche industry, we need to be able to bring some information, even though we do our own research and we do our own benchmarks and competitor research, but we do need someone sometimes in the industry to tell us, are we on the right track or not? So in that case, it's more of just an informal collaboration, and usually paid in wine or chocolate. But it's just being able to call on outsiders to help sometimes.
I think something that I've really learned in observing how Yellow Door works is the way that you value people that work with you. And it's even just in the way that you communicate on email or like you said, you never just ask people to contribute without acknowledging it. And I think that's such a key thing as well if you're thinking about collaboration, and especially ones that are maybe more on the side of a specific skill set that you're not necessarily doing a trade exchange for. But to just recognize that someone is investing time in you, and if you're not going to pay them, at least, I don't know, buy them a chocolate or something. And
it does help because we all, it's our IP. We need to be acknowledged for that.
But I think also recognizing that often there are people that are very willing to help. And, again, just bearing in mind small business and that kind of thing. Sometimes I don't know, I'll speak for myself, like we sometimes a bit scared to ask because either you feel like you should know that thing, and if you don't know it, then somehow you're going to be shown up somehow. Or that there isn't someone to help. And actually every time we've reached out, our experience has been completely different. There have been people who have been willing to help. There have been people who have wanted to actually probably go above and beyond what they need to do in order to assist. And I guess that also speaks to how collaboration can really be part of how you form your network. And that, is such an important thing to be thinking about the whole time that you're building your business, is how much is your network growing as you're doing it.
And I think something that we both do is look at how we're adding value to the other party rather than focusing on what are we getting out of this. And I think when you have that as your starting mindset, you're already helping other people. And if you think about that, then of course other people have a similar approach and are happy to help. It's a good way as well when you sort of, should I ask for help? Is thinking how quickly you are happy to help.
Yes. I have another question for you. Is that okay?
Of course.
So, in this, basically what you're speaking about there is a value for service, essentially. And that isn't necessarily, from what I've seen, like how all agencies work. It's not necessarily how the industry works too much. It seems a little bit like dog eat dog in some ways, especially in the bigger industries, bigger agencies and that kind of thing. So how have you worked within that and stuck to your values?
I think we're just very upfront about it. So we've had a lot of clients, unfortunately, come to us with bad experiences with bigger agencies, and we listen, we say, we're sorry to hear that, and this is how we do it differently. So we don't, we try not to generalize or sort of put across that all agencies have the same approach. We know ours is different. That's why we started it as a collective and why our values are such a big part of what we do. And I agree with you. Unfortunately, the industry is quite tough and quite selfish in a way. But I think there is a shift towards people embracing the approach we've taken to collaborating more, to they just, I think the model is shifting.
More human and trying to understand the need of the customer. I think that's a trend generally in business, hopefully. And I think that's because of the fact that millennials are becoming the workforce, is becoming more interested in caring for one another and for making sure that people actually, like just even the employee-employer relationship. I mean, I was reading an article the other day about it and how it's so important for people to feel like they are valued in the workplace more now than ever. And it's part of the reason why people stay at businesses is because of that. And I think it's the same thing when you're talking about business to business. It's the reason you stay with your agency is because they actually care about your business, and that's what we want to bring across. It's not necessarily that you paying us the most money or you have the biggest name out there. The brand is a big brand name. It's actually about wanting to help grow businesses, and Em loves to use the word inspire, and to be able to inspire businesses to grow and to be bigger, even if they're a small business, I think that's why it's important.
And I think what's so interesting about what you're saying is that when you start to look at like a macro picture and you see how for so many years and for probably a few generations, the focus was on productivity and people didn't matter. And that sort of filtered into a general consciousness, I think, in society. And even if I think about when I studied, and I think many people who study not only in the arts, but in the sort of creative field and probably outside of it, but that's been my experience. A lot of even the methodology of that was to break people down. It was always what was wrong with what you were doing, not what was right. And obviously we need correction and to learn and all of this. That's obvious. But even how the feedback was delivered, and then kind of moving into a professional space and coming across that same kind of attitude, which I think that's maybe what's shifting, where it's actually, yes, productivity is important. How do you actually get people to show up to work with their whole selves? And that's important. And if we can do that, then our productivity will be there. But it's not like you're beating people to do it. They actually want to do it.
It's more constructive.
Yeah. And I think circling back to how that relates to collaboration, people who want to collaborate with you or together, they are bringing their best selves to work, and they're not necessarily the kinds of people who are sitting in a job 9 to 5 to get a salary. They're doing it because they love it, and that's the reason why you want to bring them in, because they love it and they'll be good at it,
Yes, they're doing something that makes them come alive, and they're willing to do what it takes in order to deliver something really excellent.
Yeah.
Spot the trend.
Today, I want to talk about influencers, and specifically micro-influencers. We already do a lot of work with influencers, so we know a lot about them. So actually, I'm being very nice today. But what I have noticed, and sometimes trends tend to creep up on us, so we don't realize that they're a trend, but I don't know if anyone's noticed, but influencers are a real thing. So now I just wanted to touch on why micro-influencers are the way of the future. A stat that I read recently was from a study in the States, but it said that 17% of companies spend over half their marketing budget on influencers. So if you do the sums, that's a huge amount of money being poured into this industry. And by influencers, I'm talking about people on Instagram or Facebook, or even bloggers who are building a lifestyle around their interests and then collaborating with brands to
generate an income.
Yeah, to advertise those brands, but through their lifestyle. So it's not a hard sell, and it's how brands are able to reach the people that they need to reach. But my focus really is about the fact that these micro influencers, who are the niche influencers in the industry, who have a very small, maybe a smaller, or not necessarily very small, but a smaller audience. But they're very specific, that audience. So it's the mom with twins who has a specific market because they, very specific twin mums who are following this blogger or this influencer. And it's really just interesting to see how that has grown and also how brands are using that to their advantage. And we already do use them a lot, but I do find it's cool to sort of see that growing and now the proof of how much money is being poured into it.
Absolutely. So to clarify, rolling my eyes before I get stuck in, I think I'm glad that Dom focused on micro-influencers, because something I struggle with is the bigger influencers who have built up their following and tend to be quite demanding, can be rude, and I know I'm generalizing and some of them are great, but we have had sort of experiences there where the clients didn't feel like they got value for money, whereas the micro-influencers, in a similar way to people we collaborate with, are still hungry. They're still passionate about what they do.
That's a huge part of it.
That for me is what's exciting. Is we've got a number of clients that we've done influencer campaigns for this year where the influencers go above and beyond the brief. So they may be asked to do 2 Instagram posts and a story, but they will also mention on their blog and tweet about it and share it,
because they also care about
and they're invested in the brand. And I think that if you are working in marketing, want to work with influencers, that is what I would recommend, is finding people that really suit the brand, and also being upfront with your clients. Do they have budget to pay influencers? Do they want to pay in product? Influencers prefer to be paid in cash, and I think...
And is a career, so it needs to be paid like any other job.
Absolutely. And I think being clear on what budget you have available is a good starting point. So before you identify your dream influencer, to rather say, what do we have available? When do we want to launch this? Do we want to bring another brand in? And I think that's something we planning for next month, is actually looking at 2 clients that... one influencer can actually work with both. So the collaboration...
Yes, and it works for both parties, well, all 3 parties.
The ripple effect is huge when they're all talking about it, all sharing it, and kind of showing how the brands complement each other. I think we're going to see more of that.
And I think you're right about the influencers. I do believe that bubble will eventually pop, because the amount of money being paid to these people who don't necessarily... they don't have the backing behind them. They're purely just growing themselves as a brand and not necessarily caring about the brands that they are talking about. I think that kind of defeats the point of an influencer. So the micro influencers, they're not an early stage influencer. It's a specific
different model
choice, to stay small and be niched, which is cool.
Your questions answered.
Okay, so I'm jumping in on your questions answered today. We put this out to our Instagram, and we asked what people wanted to know about collaboration, if they had any questions about a collaboration. And Jessica, she wrote to us and she said, how do you navigate funding or costs involved with collaboration? It often feels so awkward. I guess the underlying question is, should you pay a collaborator?
So I think there's a couple of ways to go about it. If you're doing an exchange, we'd definitely recommend that you put together a costing and you're very upfront about what it would cost, so you can see if it's fair and if it's an equal exchange, or if one party should possibly either increase the scope of work or pay in a portion of it. And when it's collaborating like with another agency, I think there's a number of ways to do it, but what can work quite well is just putting on either a commission or sharing what the fee is going to be and how that's broken down.
Giving an agency rate or some kind of discount also helps, because obviously we know that, and especially if it's a sort of a lead, we wouldn't have got the work if it wasn't for that business or for that person. So it is important to acknowledge that. And that's kind of what we do. We just acknowledge it and give them a commission, or we collaborate on a rate.
I think basically you need to recognize the value both of what you're offering and of what the other person is offering. And as long as both parties agree to it and it feels fair, then work like that, I would say.
Yeah, I think we need to get over the awkwardness around money.
Definitely.
It's business and it's not personal. So we do need to just kind of get over that barrier.
And value what you do. Put a monetary value to something that you're doing. And even if you're not exchanging actual money, rands, dollars, whatever. At least know the value of what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, we actually do feel, we've actually been impressed by people who just state their rates, and we can still say look, actually we don't have the budget for that, but this is what we can offer. And then sometimes we part ways and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it works out.
But then there's at least there's a conversation to have at least once you know what that rate is.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome.
And another question we were asked is what counts as a micro influencer?
I asked that question because I don't know. Don't edit that out, Jason. It's funny.
So I do think that has changed over the past few years, as Instagram specifically, because that is where most micro influencers live, as it's grown and as a lot more people are joining Instagram, the threshold is between 3,000 and 15,000 followers. That constitutes an audience that is relevant or plausible for you to be able to be a micro influencer.
And I think it's also worth looking at the engagement on the posts.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just how many followers, because obviously we know that can be
buy them.
faked.
Yeah.
So it's important to look at how much engagement they get. But most micro influencers will have a rate card and they'll have their stats on there, and they'll also be able to say how much engagement they get per post or views per story. So you got to look out for those things as well. Thanks for listening to this episode of Life Behind the Yellow Door. We'd love to hear from you. So if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, pop us a message via our social media pages @HelloYellowDoor, and we'll do our best to answer them in upcoming episodes.